Okay, I can see we've got a few people joining in already. The webinar will begin shortly. We're a couple of minutes early. So just sit back and relax and we'll get underway with our first webinar of the spring in just a few minutes. Let's see, we've got some more people joining in still. We are just a minute before start time. The webinar will begin shortly, so just in a couple of minutes we will get underway. Really pleased to see a lot of you joining in. I can see we are getting more people joining, so I will just give another minute before we get underway. Really excited to see so many of you joining in. Okay. We've reached 3 o'clock in the UK, so for whatever time it is for you, either good morning or good afternoon or maybe good evening. Welcome to our first webinar of the spring, Virtuoso's webinar. Just to let you know before we start, this webinar is being recorded. So you'll be able to watch it afterwards or share it around if you like. Note as well that fortunately or unfortunately, I'll be doing all the talking, but we will allow you to ask questions, of course, in the chat, and towards the end, more than happy to take questions. But otherwise, let's get underway. So Virtuoso's webinar on generative AI, the future of test automation unlocked, a webinar. So I think this is really an exciting topic, which is why I think so many people are joining in. So meet your presenter. I kind of talk about me. I won't do it in the third person. My name is James Bent. I am the VP of Solution Engineering for Virtuoso. I do work with a lot of our customers across a range of industries to solution how our test automation platform works for testing browser-based applications. And have worked for over the last 15 years with a variety of SaaS organizations. But that's not really why you're here. You're here because we've enticed you with our topic and agenda, which is, of course, one of the biggest topics out there right now is AI. And not just AI, but generative AI. And, you know, considering we're all interested in testing, what generative AI means for the future of test automation. So today's agenda is going to take us through learning about our hot take on Gen AI, to see some of our latest capabilities that do use Gen AI, giving you the chance to learn about, you know, what does a glimpse into the future of test automation look like with generative AI? What are some of the benefits and challenges that, you know, we see, considering we've been doing AI now for about 3 or 4 years, and now generative AI now for about 6 months. What do we see the benefits and challenges? How we think you can start considering developing a QA strategy with Gen AI. And then we'll be unveiling what we've called our suite of Gen AI features, which is called Omni, which is our all-new GenAI-packed feature set, and which we will be continuing to add to. And then we've got some practical considerations of Gen AI in testing before I'm going to then show you what we've been doing with a live demo. So just very quickly, for those of you who haven't heard of us before or who have not looked at us in much detail, Virtuoso is an AI-powered natural language test automation platform. So we've been using AI again for about 4 years since the platform was built or came to market. It speeds testing by empowering non-engineers. It also allows engineers also to create self-maintaining automation in the cloud. We focus on UI and integration testing for browser-based applications. So front-end or back-office applications using natural language, which I'll show to you when we get the demo. And we call ourselves low-code because you can customize this, and I'll show you how you can do that, again, using AI. A low-code autonomous testing platform driven by robotic automation allied to machine learning and self-healing. But look, let's get back to the generative AI. So a glimpse into the future of test automation. And to be honest, it's early doors in terms of exactly where things we can go. I mean, if you think back to last year with suddenly things like ChatGPT coming to the sort of public mindset, if you think what's happened since then, I mean, I was watching the other day a video of videos that were created by AI a year ago with sort of people with 20 fingers and doing funny sort of gestures to now actually creating something quite realistic. The simple fact is the developments in AI are going so quickly, we can't really predict accurately what's going to happen in like a year, 2 or 3 or 4 years. But we can start to sort of answer, I think, some of the key questions that people are asking. And it's probably correct to say a glimpse into the future is a glimpse into ourselves in terms of what does this hold for us. So I put a few points here that I'm going to discuss. Is AI going to make testing autonomous, or is it going to be assisted? Is it going to replace people, or is it going to empower them? Is it going to do everything always? And is it going to be all seeing, all singing, all dancing? Now, we already are seeing, based on what I'm going to show you today, the answers are autonomous or assistive. It's assistive. It's simply not autonomous at this stage. It's just not there. Is it going to replace people? Definitely not. It's going to empower them. I think everyone here can probably feel that, nobody is able to do all the job they need to do at the moment. So we don't need things to replace us. We need things to empower us to do more. We don't automate to replace. We automate to make sure we can do more of our jobs and scale up. Is it going to do everything? No, it is definitely not. And I'll give you some examples of that today. And is it going to be all seeing, all singing, all dancing? No, not in the near future. And I think part of that is because AI really isn't that. It's not an artificial intelligence. It really is kind of a very smart rules engine. It's not a kind of live intelligence that knows exactly the things that we do as people. But it will definitely allow us to do great things. So for me, I think we keep this firmly in the realm of it's an assistive technology, which is incredibly powerful and that's going to empower us. So then what about developing a QA strategy with GenAI? And I think there are some sort of key things to consider which don't really actually matter whether it's generative AI. I think more it comes down to the basics of a QA strategy, which are, number one, the fundamentals of using automation in QA, which actually links into the second point I've got there, which I'll make a point of, which is, number one, automation doesn't equal QA. Quality assurance, or for some people, quality engineering, is not automated tests. And in fact, a lot of things that we do in QA or QE, quality assurance or quality engineering, probably couldn't be automated. Those sort of random exploratory type tests, or the way we go about trying to break things based on our knowledge of how users may or may not use them, that may be logical or illogical. Sometimes it actually doesn't make sense to automate that. So the fundamentals are that actually you shouldn't be trying to automate everything. So number one, GenAI, the fact it is technology, means that actually it's not going to form the basis of your entire QA strategy. To that end, should you be even trying to automate everything? There's a lot of discussion, I know, I look around things like LinkedIn around, should we be trying to automate 100%, get 100% coverage with automation? And the answer is absolutely not. So whatever you see here today, or whatever you think about automation, it's only going to form a component of your QA strategy, which by nature means that if GenAI is powering your automation, it's only going to form, therefore, a part of your QA strategy. So where should it really be used? And again, it goes back to where should I use automation? It's really the repeatable, the knowable, the automatable. if that's even a word. The things that, we've got our standard end-to-end test that's got a given input with a given output and some given steps that are going to be repeated every time. That's the sort of thing, the pure testing that you can definitely look to automate. And I think within that, the Gen AI, as you will see today, can be used for things like the development of those tests, the maintenance of those tests. It can be used for things like potentially going forward for saying, can I build from requirements? And the answer is yes, you can. And we can show you what that looks like. But also, it's not what Gen AI will do for, let's say, your automation. Think what Gen AI does for us as people, as QAs or QEs, quality assurance or quality engineers. If we can use Gen AI and automation to actually make it easier to gain an increased amount of coverage without taking up all our time working on that, it lets us perform those types of activities that require us to actually put our hands on the keyboard or whatever interface and perform those things that actually always should be done. I hate the word manually, but with our hands, not with machines. So actually, how can a QA strategy with automation and Gen AI power us to do our jobs, the things we want to do? And simply the reality with Gen AI is it is not artificial intelligence. It is a rules engine effectively that's very complex and is able to take inputs and have given outputs and then kind of make really intelligent guesses based on that logic, but it's not an oracle. It doesn't know intent. We have to feed it that. It doesn't really know the output. We have to validate that. So the reality of Gen AI is actually that we need to assist Gen AI. It's not able to operate on its own. So it by nature then is assistive. Therefore, your QA strategy with Gen AI should be one to say, how can it enable us? How can it empower us? How can it scale us? And how can it make us faster? And at no point in there should be saying it should replace us. I'm sure nobody here is working in a quality assurance or quality engineering role is saying, do you know what, guys? I actually have so much free time because I get my job done so quickly that I just don't need any sort of assistance. I'd say it's exactly the opposite. Gen AI can be that assistance. But then what are the benefits and the challenges of it? So the benefits of it are, I was talking to someone the other day, I think it's going to be a bit more, if anybody here is a developer or an engineer who writes code, or even actually saying that writes code, is a lot of developers will take code that's pre-written, whether they've Google searched it or taking it from examples. They'll drop it in, patch it together, and then they will go through and run it and refactor it. Actually, this is probably what Gen AI is going to do at the moment because it can't be correct in every single case. So actually what it's going to do, and I'll show you an example of this, is it's going to enable you, it's going to assist you to lay the foundation of automated testing, but it will require us to then go through and say, actually, was that what I wanted it to do? Was it correct? Did it know everything? Or do I need to refactor it? But the point there is actually enables us to go really quickly because refactoring things and then repeating them is much quicker than having to write everything always from scratch. And that means if we can simply go faster, we can cover more, but it also frees us up. And I don't know if it's correct to say to do real QA or QA, but kind of this fun stuff that probably everyone signs up for when they come into quality assurance, the actual getting in and finding exotic ways to try and break things or validate that they're working as expected or to improve the quality. The challenges are, if you're talking browser-based applications, is that for all intents and purposes, there are no web standards. Anybody who works with the web applications, which is pretty much all of us, knows that if I go across two different browser-based applications and I try and automate against a drop-down, almost guaranteed they'll have been implemented completely differently, and the way you automate them will be completely different. So from this point of view, Gen AI at the moment won't necessarily be able to know, taking into account the sort of model and framework that any automation uses, it's not necessarily going to know in all cases the correct way to create automated test steps. Doesn't mean it's bad, but it just means that this is a challenge. But also, not all is as it appears. So if you think about single page applications where it's literally a single page where it's served new sort of content as you interact with the application. Well, if it's not loaded when the application first appears, then you can't know what isn't there yet. So therefore, if AI or generative AI, you ask it to do something and yet the application hasn't yet presented the state that it wants to move to, then GenAI is going to struggle to know, what's the input and what's the given output and how do I get there? Again, these aren't insurmountable, and these are probably the near-term things that Gen AI will improve to. But nevertheless, this isn't just a challenge for Gen AI, this is a challenge for automated testing. But now let's get into the fun stuff, because I'm sure that's insightful, but I guess a lot of people are coming here to say, what have you guys done then? So Unveiling Omni, our all-new GenAI-packed feature. I'm sure some of you can tell as well, we should probably come up with a different term than GenAI because it doesn't roll off the tongue very easily, but there you go. So since November of last year, we've been adding to our stable of AI capabilities. So we've got about sort of 5 core AI capabilities already that we've had in the platform from day 0. We've been supplementing that with new generative AI features, some of which are general release, and others are in the latter stages of beta awaiting general release, but we have our customers using them nonetheless, even if they're in a smaller sample size. The first one, and probably the one that I think is going to excite people the most, it blew our heads off when we first saw it, when our engineers presented it, AI authoring. Author tests using generative AI to create test steps based on true natural language inputs. For example, requirements or natural language descriptions. So work basically from the way we speak and talk without knowing how the automation is built, use GenAI to create automation. I'll show you that today. And the second capability is AI root cause analysis. So this one is, you get a test failure, and of course, it can be difficult to understand why a test has failed. Simply because there can be so many reasons. It could be the test, it could be the environment, it could be a client server error, it could be something on the network. Very hard to debug that. But actually, and what we'll show is because we capture so much information when we run a test, we'll show you how we can use generative AI to provide data-driven insights into the root cause analysis with contextualized suggestions to say, let's give you a hand to say what went wrong. So actually starting there is, why is that even of interest? And it's simply because when a test runs, and this is actually the whole point of any automation, is you need to review the output. And where it goes green, that's fantastic, or well, it could be fantastic. You've got to validate that it's a true valid green. But when it goes red, I mean, this is something that is a struggle for all testers to play. I've got to find out what went wrong, but it's not always easy. And so what we've done is we've used AI models that take various inputs, and you'll see that we're actually capturing in Virtuoso. We've obviously got the test steps, we've got network events, we've got failure reason, error codes, screenshots, DOM structure. We've got all this information. And through that, we can basically let AI suggest and say, well, look, here are some reasons why that may have failed. It's not necessarily going to be, there could be multiple suggestions that you still have to go through and review them, but it just gives you some hints of where could I start with this. And the benefit is reduce the speed to debug your issues when the test fails, making it easier to fix, and make it easier for non-technical users to understand the reason for test failures. Then we've got our AI authoring. So no matter how easy you make things, I mean, we're using natural language in Virtuoso, which is very similar to writing a test, like a manual test. But no matter how easy you take it, every test automation has some sort of programmatic structure. Even our natural language is programmatic. We have defined syntax. We have a structure you write a test step in. It's easy, but you've still got to learn it to some extent. So now the question is actually advancements in AI change that. So using AI models, we allow the user, it could be to specify a region of the screen, and then with a true natural language description, have AI suggest test steps using our natural language syntax. And the benefit of this is an even greater speed together with even greater usability, where test authors can benefit from a true natural language approach together with the intent of what they want to do to create robust working test automation without a learning curve. I mean, that's pretty much utopia for any automation. Now, just before we get into the demo, and I promise you we will get in, and please do as well, if anybody has questions, do drop them in. I can't actively see the question box, but towards the end, I will make sure that we have time so that we can go through those. Now, initially, when we were putting this together, we proposed, and you may have seen in the agenda, talking about the ethical considerations of GenAI. Now, for me, honestly, within testing, considering with everything I've seen so far, that I don't believe this is going to pose a threat to us as testers, as QAs, as QEs. I don't know immediately there are ethical considerations because we're talking testing, and for me, this is firmly assistive. And in fact, most of the questions we've had talking to people has not been around the ethics of AI. It's more the practical considerations around things like security, around accuracy. They're more the things that people are concerned around. And I think everyone is kind of like thinking the same. So, these are the two most common things where from a security perspective, number one, we're a testing platform. We test non-production environments with test data. So we don't allow you to test production environments. We don't allow you to pass in PI or other personal data. So number one, it only has testing data. But number two, we use a dedicated business plan where we're passing this through to the AI models. We're actually lucky because before we bundle up and send off whatever somebody puts in as a request, we actually decide what we want to send to that model. So we don't actually pass application data through to the environment. So even if it is test data, it is not passed. So that's number one. And also, by the way, we're SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, and we have all the standard security and data security things in place that you would expect. The second thing then is accuracy and real intelligence. And as I've said a few times, AI is not an oracle. It's not even artificially intelligent, really. It's not intelligent. It doesn't know. In that case, then the answer is it's not always right. But as you'll see in what I'm going to show to you, this isn't about pressing a button and in the background it going off, creating automation and running it, and you have no idea what's happening. This is very much assistive, human in the loop to make you faster, but it's certainly, I think you started from the basis that just like a developer taking some code snippets and dropping them in, they wouldn't expect that to run perfectly first time. They know they're going to have to do some level of refactoring, but it's quicker to do that, much quicker than it is to create it from scratch. So if you think of it from the outset as an assistant that you are looped into, takes away a lot of those concerns. So now let's actually get into what I think we're already doing here, which is generative AI, the future of test automation unlocked. And let's look at a showcase of what we've been putting in place. So I'm just going to share my screen in a second. Let me drag this up here. Okay. So I'm just going to actually stop sharing and make sure I am sharing the right screen. Yep, it appears I am. Fantastic. Great. So Virtuoso, number one, before I get into the GenAI, before anyone, if anyone doesn't know already, we are ourselves a browser-based application. We're natural language-based. We allow you to write test steps in natural language. For instance, if there's a login button, I can use natural language syntax with what I see on the screen. You don't need to build page object models or find selectors or define keywords. It's literally right as you go based on what you see on the screen. It's an authoring tool for functional UI testing of browser-based applications. This is actually a test running through out systems, and in a second we'll see Dynamics 365. So if you have a browser-based application for functional UI testing, you can use Virtuoso for all that. Just before I get into the Gen AI features, where we talk about sort of AI capabilities we already have, our ability to enable you to write a test step and immediately run it as you write it, have the platform then run a bot which locates that element without anything more than a hint, what you see on the screen, that's already using AI to locate those elements. So the core of the platform already makes it really easy to create automation. And I'll show you that working in just a second. But actually, when we come, the first thing I'm going to talk about is showing you the our Omni AI authoring. So I'm here in Dynamics 365, and imagine that I've come into Virtuoso, and I've been presented where somebody might have set up the test steps for me to log in already. And by the way, you can have what we call library checkpoints, sequences, like login steps that I can reuse and drop in wherever I like. Just a step back, what you're really doing here is creating end-to-end journeys. So here I'm logging into an insurance platform, creating a customer with data-driven steps. I'm creating a policy, checking the PDF of the policy before, in the same test, opening a new tab, and in this case, opening Dynamics 365. It could be Salesforce, it could be SAP or Oracle, the cloud versions, it could be any browser-based system. This is exactly the same thing what I'm going to show you, no matter what the browser-based system. But when we talk about then AI authoring, what I can do is come in and I can, let's say, select a region of the screen, and then without me knowing the syntax, so how to go about using Virtuoso's natural language, I could say, click on accounts and create a new account. So I could give sort of more free-form text. I don't have to specify a region on the screen, but it helps kind of focus it. And then what this does, it suggests test steps for me, which I could then add in. So literally, I've passed that through into AI models. It's gone and suggested and created some test steps. And then it's gone both to click on the accounts, but then it's gone and said, click on the account. Now, the reason that failed is because the page just took a few seconds to load. So I could just hover over and say, I can fix that. So I can click on new. So straight away, you can see it didn't get it perfectly right, but I was able to just go and fix that really quickly and then sort of refactor that. What I could then do is say, maybe I want to fill in the account information. So I could then go and select over the account information and say, fill in the account information. Now, again, a natural language command. I'm not sort of specifying the fields I want it to enter. I have indicated a region on the screen. But by doing that, it's going to generate test steps for me. Now, the interesting thing here is that, of course, and thinking about, again, AI, what can it do? Is it going to be right every time? Well, unless you provided sort of an input for the data, it doesn't know potentially the valid data that you want to put in. So in this case, it's put in placeholder data. Now I can say, well, that's not what I wanted. I want to put in a specific account. So now what I could do, again, I can refactor this. I could put in a pause point. I could then go and change this to say, let's go and use Virtuoso QA, for example. And then I could say in the website, I'm going to put in, let's put virtuoso.qa. So now what I can do is I'm refactoring it with the data. And then what I can do is just run here again from that step. There we go, it's updated. It's found the field, it's written the value I want. I could then remove the pause point. So I can kind of step through each of the steps it's created and then see that, there we go, it puts the value into the screen. So the point here is that I can start creating the test steps. I may have to go and refactor those, but it's starting to kind of suggest those to me. I could come down to the address now and do the same thing. So I could select over the address, for example, and say, fill in the address details. So again, I'm not really being very specific, but I'm asking it to then suggest test steps. The way it's actually doing this, what we are doing is we're not just sending across that simple hint to the large language models, the AI. We're bundling up and sending things like the DOM structure. We're sending things like, from our documentation, our natural language syntax, so that we're able to basically go through and have it understand that based on my intent, based on what's on the screen, it can start going through and, as you can see, putting the details in. Even here where it's generating, again, placeholder data for that I could go and refactor. So you can see very quickly, without me actually knowing the Virtuoso's natural language syntax, I can put in more natural language commands, have it generate test steps for me, and then start creating that flow for me. Now, again, it's not perfect. There will be places where you have to go in. For instance, if you get a field where it does a lookup, for example. So I might come in and say, I could go to the parent account. So I could select over here and say, fill in the parent account. What AI may not know is that that's likely going to be a lookup field, which has to run a script to be able to go and look up in the backend for the values. So when it does this, it doesn't necessarily know that there's a drop-down appearing, so it can't suggest there's an additional test step to then click Virtuoso QA. But that's fine, because then I can just supplement this. I can already see from this, it's kind of teaching me the natural language, so I can come in and say, well, great, then I've just got to go and add a test step to click Virtuoso QA. And that goes and runs that step for me and puts the value in there. So again, this isn't going to be autonomous. This is going to be assistive to very quickly enable me to start putting together a whole bunch of test steps, but also kind of teaching me the natural language syntax to make it even easier for me to go and run this. And then if I want to go, let's say, and just perform a simple action, I could use AI authoring to then say, go and click on save and close. Or I might say, well, do you know what? I've actually started learning this now. So I might just say, I'm going to start writing it myself. I feel pretty confident. So I'm just going to say, click save and close. We call this live authoring. I didn't have to build an object or a model called save and close. I could simply write what I saw on the screen, and it went ahead and interacted with that element. So that's where we're already using AI in the platform for element identification without you putting anything specific in there. So we're really excited about this, but also where we see this going is because in Virtuoso, you actually don't even need the application to be ready. Because we're natural language and you don't need to put in selectors, you can start building things from requirements, for example, maybe from Gherkin syntax, for example. So we're actually starting to consider, where can we take this further? So this is already sort of starting in development now, but we're starting to think, can we take it so that you could feed in user stories, requirements, and actually either translate them maybe into a sort of a Gherkin syntax or a BDD, or just take them as they are and start authoring the test, where it might go through and say, well, I've got actually 6 different parts. Can I have AI go through and maybe suggest the first part? I validate that and refactor it, and then say you're ready to go, and then start writing the next part. We think this year is going to be incredibly exciting for where this goes, but already we're starting to see through our customers that have started to validate this, we're starting to see they're already incredibly excited as an assistant and an enabler to start creating automation. So that's our AI authoring. And we have got, it's already in our documentation, which is docs.virtuoso.qa, but we'd be happy for anyone to come and chat to us about this and talk a bit more about how this works. The second thing I want to talk about then is the AI root cause analysis. So for example, here, I've got a test execution. And for those of you who don't know, Virtuoso is not just an authoring platform. It is a platform for doing end-to-end testing in terms of I create my tests, I can put those into projects, into what we call goals and test plaques. I can put on tags on those. I can then orchestrate these into execution plans. So I can build out my regression pack. And then when I run that, we're your grid as well. We're on AWS, so we will run the tests for you in parallel and give you fully versioned test results that you can refer back to. And the great thing being natural language is you can read the test steps. You've got screenshots captured so you can see what's going wrong. We've got capturing things like network requests and console logs, as well as step level timings. We're actually capturing an enormous amount of information. But that said, if it gets to a test step, you still got to figure out what went wrong. And we tell you the target element wasn't found, and that's fantastic. But what does that mean? What's the possible cause of that? So what we're now doing is saying, actually, I can feed in all of these inputs to AI models and have it kind of start to determine, actually, what went wrong? Can you give me some further insights? And you can see here, we've fed in all the information we have where it starts to give some details. So it could be, for example, so the doctor that it was looking for, so it's recognized the data value was Aria Cruz. So that came from the test data. So it's saying, actually, that may not be on the screen anymore. So your test data may not be correct, or it could be the application has layout has changed, or maybe there's a loading issue. So it's already giving you some things that you could start to think of. It may be that the website is completely changed and the test step is no longer valid. Or it may be that because the information may be dynamically loaded, again, if the application only waited so long, then maybe that wasn't long enough. So there's some immediately things, without going back to a developer or an engineer, it's starting to suggest to say, actually, here are some things you can go and check first, and kind of enables you to say, actually, yeah, this empowers me to go and check those things without involving other people. If you have API calls, because you can build APIs into Virtuoso. So you can test API endpoints, whether it's in a functional flow, for instance, creating or getting or passing data. It will also analyze things like APIs. If you get like a 401, if you don't know what a 401 is, it will explain that for you. So there's actually this, while it's not, it's kind of, it gives you some bullet points of things to check. That's actually pretty powerful for any tester to be able to turn around and say, you're helping me very quickly, instead of sitting there for ages trying to work out what went wrong. You could tell me straight away. One of those things might be incredibly correct and say, yeah, I'm just going to go and update the test data. Therefore, I'll go across to my test data set and change so that I go across and change the name of the doctor. And maybe I want to use test set 5 and 6 instead. Then I can just rerun it, see that it passes and go fantastic, and then mark the failure down to incorrect test data. So it's actually quite a powerful capability, and it's definitely assisted to be able to empower you, although it's not, again, it's not going to tell you the exact answers. It's going to basically use the given inputs to give the best suggestions. So that's two of our core sort of new generative AI capabilities. But another I just want to sort of give you a quick highlight to is the fact that if you remember, I called Virtuoso low code. The reason being is that you can actually create your own natural language. So all of these, we call them extensions. So these natural language commands, which you can go through and actually say, if I want to create my own function, for instance, I want to do today's date in month, year, day, or day format. So I've created a natural language syntax that I could run in a test. And now I could build JavaScript to go and run that. But if you're like me and I literally do not know JavaScript, I mean, I can try and hack it together, but I'm rubbish. Then I can use an AI assistant. Again, this is generative AI to go able to say, create today's date in month, year, day format for me. And it will go and write the JavaScript for me. And it's pretty good. In fact, it's very good. I managed to write a massive number of different functions for this. And then I just need to make sure that I'm actually returning the output of this. And then basically what I've done is I've created my own command where I don't need to run JavaScript in my test. I can just come in and put that function and return it into a variable to basically come into my test and say, I want to create today's date. Let's go today, add in my new function I've just created and say return date, and that will go and immediately generate that function for me. So the nice thing there is that, being able to come through and have the ability to extend the platform to create your own extensions just means that you don't need to know code. And again, it's an empowerment tool, but also enables you to make this so that it does become more extendable. And then another thing to show, which again is using sort of more generative AI, is test data. So you can feed in test data tables to your tests with sort of parameterized data sets, where I can go through and use AI. For instance, if I want to say, I want to create 10 random customers, I can then pass in and say, create 10 customers with first name, last name, phone number, and city, all in the West Coast of the US. Then I can feed that in and have it create for me. basically generic test data sets that then I could add in and then start augmenting. Then I've got sort of system values. I can start passing those in, or I could actually do that to an existing test data table where I could edit that with AI and basically supplement it with more randomized generic data. So we already have a whole bunch of AI that's powering our platform, our natural language platform for functional UI, testing of browser-based applications. But with the new generative AI, both for authoring tests with AI to assist you, or for the root cause analysis, those two capabilities are two of the things we're adding in and will continue developing that really start to make this much faster. But again, thinking back to that sort of initial, what is this really used for? Again, we don't see that this should be viewed as something to replace people. This is very much about empowering people to then get back from doing testing to doing more quality assurance or quality engineering. So I was going to say, I feel like I've been talking for 40 minutes, but I quite literally have. So what I'm going to do now is take a look at some of the questions that come through. So you've been popping those into the Q&A. Feel free to drop them in. But also, you can see the website at the bottom, virtuoso.qa. If you go there, you will be able to see how to get in touch with us. We don't bite, so please come and talk to us if you want to talk to us afterwards. So the first one is, can you share a comparison between AI authoring and Gherkin syntax from a requirement standpoint? And I suppose the thing here is, in some sense, the principle is kind of the same, as you're trying to use more of a natural language approach that's not so much aligned to any particular model, even though you could argue sort of true Gherkin syntax is kind of programmatic. To start, saying, I want to work from the point of defining intent in a kind of a more natural language way. The thing there is, though, Gherkin syntax, to create working automation for it, you actually need some sort of tooling to convert that. And typically, you're still going to need to go through and set up things like keywords or elements for it to work on. So the difference here is you're taking the same sorts of inputs, but the AI authoring is building the working automation for you. And it's then using our already out-of-the-box capabilities of the way that you can use a bot to use AI with that intent to then go and locate the elements for you to build the working automation. The point is, you don't really have to worry about the automation piece. So I'd say the comparison is how you then automate from those. But also the fact that in principle, you could say you don't have to use a prescribed syntax in the AI authoring. It's more freeform. And great. Actually, I've just answered you, or you got the answer there, but that's great. I think it's good to reiterate that. Can you integrate TestRail to Virtuoso? So yes, but not for the purpose you're asking here, which is to take test steps to then generate the automated journeys. So right now you can integrate to TestRail to pass back test results. But this is actually exactly where we're thinking this will go, in as much as saying, if I've already got my test steps written in, let's say, TestRail or in Jira user stories or some other format, can I just push them to you through an API and then jump across and see that you've generated automated journeys? That is exactly where we see this going. This is iteration one, but this is literally what we're incredibly excited about. Even think about migrating tests. If you've got a big framework, you've got lots of tests, you can actually do cool things like, say, put my Selenium test into ChatGPT and convert it into Gherkin syntax, feed that into the AI authoring and have it generate tests for me. I mean, there are massive opportunities here. And that's exactly where we are. We've already got our headspace in. So this is version one, but yeah, we're super excited about where this goes. Was Virtuoso designed to also support entire REST API testing? So if you think about that testing pyramid, we're predominantly at the top. We're functional UI. We're the top layer, where we do have the ability for you to build API calls. We have an API manager, but it's not really API testing. So it's not like when I release a new version of my API, can I test it? It's more to incorporate APIs into your tests. So for instance, example, if I'm in Salesforce and I want to change the status of an opportunity, but I don't know the opportunity, I could bring in a REST API call to go and query opportunities, return into a response with an ID of an opportunity. And then I could feed that into the UI test to change that. So you could actually do these sequential flows of API calls but more, I would say, from workflow or test data perspectives. But the answer is yes, you can incorporate REST API calls to this. Steve, you lost audio. I hope you've got it back now. If you can still hear us and you're still here, then please do come back to us. And I've got someone saying that as a long-time user of Virtuoso, I can say that this GenAI is impressive. Thank you very much. And it will make a big difference. And yeah, on more of the time-consuming stuff like filling fields with random data, I agree with you. Form filling is probably a great application for this. So the GenAI, what are other people doing? So login flows tend to be the same. Can GenAI learn from this and implement some modules? So if you need a login flow, can you go in and sort of search through a list of modules? Basically, I think what you're trying to get to is, can GenAI start to explore? And the answer is sort of. But you kind of need to start saying, actually, it still needs to be fed something. You can't just say, go and look at that application and have it know the user flows. That's what it's not going to do. If you're going to even start to go there, you start having to think, you've got to feed it some sort of, say, production data that give you sort of some inputs. At the moment, it's probably not going to go there. And I think a lot of people would probably sort of get nervous that it's just going to create noise. That said, we have, if you remember, our library checkpoints. So if you have login sequences, you can just drop them in yourselves. I don't see generative AI as being an exclusive way of authoring. You're going to put some things in, you're going to write some things yourself, you're going to put in some composable segments yourself, and then supplement it with Gen AI. It's going to be a blended approach to this. Would this work for cross-browser? Yes. So we run on a headless Chrome, but you can pass through to our browser stack or Lambda test to run on different OS and devices. Which languages do we support? So the nice thing is with the natural language, if you're testing a website in Turkish, where the bots are actually looking in the DOM, the language is in the DOM, so you can write the test step, not the syntax. So click on, and then whatever your element is, whether it's in Turkish or French or German or Spanish or whatever, then you can write your hint, if you like, in that language. Otherwise, the application itself, the interface is English only. How to tackle multi-factor authentication. If you're using 2FA with Authenticator, then we can actually, you can call across to Authenticator with a secret key and get the OTP. We've actually got that on our website, on our YouTube channel. If you search Virtuoso multi-factor authentication with 2FA, there's a video on there that shows you how to do that. We can't do things like capture, nobody can, and you shouldn't. Can you create CI/CD pipelines with Jenkins? Yes, we're an open API. You can integrate with any CI/CD tool, and most of our customers do. So you can trigger tests directly from your pipeline and get test results passed back. Jenkins, ADO, Circle, and so on. Yes, you can integrate with CI/CD. And I'm whizzing through this because there are quite a few. Can Gen AI help in generating synthetic test data based on application data model? We're not a synthetic data generator. We're not taking application data sets and then converting them into synthetic data. I would say at the moment we're generating random data. There are great testing tools, great tools out there that can help you pass in, let's say, a CSV file of data, which will help you generate synthetic test data sets. You could then feed those back into Virtuoso, whether it's through an API call or through a CSV upload. So yeah, we don't do that. But GenAI, yeah, of course it's going to help in that space for those platforms that help with synthetic test data generation. Can we utilize data tables to send API requests? The answer is yes. You can upload CSV files, you can have environment data, you can create random data, and then you can map those into your API calls as inputs, even use them to pass in expected outputs and validate against responses. So the answer is yes, you can do that. Does it support visual comparison? To a degree. You can capture what we call snapshots of the entire page, and then you can run a comparison between releases. It is whole page though. So if there's any change, it's going to say there is some level of change. So I would say it's a secondary capability for us. You also asked there about CI/CD. The answer is yes. You can hook this into CI/CD. Is there a plan to integrate a test management tool with AI features enabled? Again, yeah, that's where we see this going in terms of taking test steps and in a test management tool and using it for generative AI. Is the XPath required to locate an element? No, absolutely not. You do not need to use selectors. If there's a login button, I can say click on login, the bots will go and find that element. Even if there are multiples, you've got a table full of edit buttons, I could say, look for record 1, 2, 3 in one test deck, and then click on edit, and it will contextually know which part of the page it's got to go on. So no, you do not need to use selectors, though you can use, let's say, a class or a name from the DOM of, let's say, a logo. So of course you can use that, but you don't need to feed an XPath, and you shouldn't. Dynamic XPath, your hint could be a dynamic XPath if you wanted to use that. So you don't have to, but you could build a dynamic XPath, and instead of saying click on login, you could say click on, and then your dynamic XPath. Still AI authoring and AI for extensions are under for development. AI for extensions has been in the platform for probably 6 to 8 months now, so that's ready. AI authoring is the latter stages of beta development. So that's going to be coming very shortly. That said, you know, if somebody really wants to try it, then we can basically enable that for you, but with the caveat that it is beta at the moment. It's not going to cover everything at this stage, but we, you know, improve it further and further. But definitely the extensions are available. And can it cover negative scenarios? Absolutely. So if you think a negative scenario is actually exactly the same as a positive scenario. For a given input, I expect a given output. If I put a rubbish, a value into a password field that doesn't meet the password criteria, then I expect to see that there's a message come up to say your password doesn't meet the expected format. So I would put my test data as the bad data effectively, and then I would have my test data have the expected result, and I would assert or look for the value on the screen which says the value is wrong. So actually negative testing is really kind of the same. It's just the nature of the inputs and outputs you're expecting. So in that way, yes, you can, although you could say, unless it's repeatable, should you be automating the negative scenarios, or should you actually be putting those more into, those are the things I will do, because they may be so complex or so unrepeatable that I might use this for doing the positive testing, and then this frees you up to do the negative testing potentially. But yeah, it can. Okay, I think I have answered all of those, and I think I've taken you over, and the fact there's still a whole bunch of you here. Thank you very much. This will be available on the website as a recording. If you want to get in touch, please do so. Virtuoso.qa, go to the contact us. We love to talk to you, and thank you very much, everyone, for attending today. And we'll look out for future webinars to come. And otherwise, it's simply for me to say, have a great rest of your day. Look forward to talking to you again, and hope that's quite soon. Thank you very much, everyone.